So I do this whole like spiel about general information about why people fall. When it's typically caregivers, it's a little bit different. It's more of a conversation, if that makes sense. So my normal, what the person who told you I do, is that I stand in front of it and there's like a half moon of 30 people, and I literally go over some statistics, and then I actually show people how to get up from the floor, which I can certainly do. It's just a little less.
We would love whatever you have to
Okay,
give us.
so I'm trying to like gear it to my audience a little bit differently.
Well,
so.
you've got a nice mix here, because we've got Barry, who volunteers with us sometimes, but is also interested in his own fall risk.
Okay.
And then we've got some staff here who, we have, what are we at, like 17 to 20 families at a time.
Okay.
That use our adult day service.
Okay.
And we are the ones giving advice very often on like when they come in and they say, we are feeling like this is a danger.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess, well, since we're filming, so to introduce myself, my name is Christina. I'm a physical therapist for Reformed Physical Therapy. A little bit about my background. I've been a physical therapist since 2013, which seems like a long time ago. I have a bachelor's degree in biology, a doctorate in physical therapy, and I've been doing this particular presentation or version of this for like the last 10 years since I've moved to Maine. So I primarily work in outpatient orthopedics, which means I see everything from toe pain to post-op knees to balance, all of the things in between. And I also per diem in the hospital at Mid-Coast Hospital on the weekends because I love it so much. That being said, all of those things, the packets that are here, and I can give you guys some if you want them. These give a little bit of information about falls in America according to the CDC on the first page. And I'll leave some of these with you guys as well because it also gives some pretty good visuals for people who fall to be able to get back up on page 2 and 3. You're welcome. So, I like to kind of just read through the first one. You can certainly read through for yourselves. But statistically, according to the CDC, 1 in 4 Americans aged 65 or older will fall every year. That number increases every decade and every year of life going forward. So we just don't keep statistics on every single age. But think of it, the older you get, the more likely it is that you're going to have a fall or somebody in your demographic will have a fall. And in the United States, every 11 seconds, an older adult is treated in the emergency room for a fall. And every 19 minutes, an older adult has a fatal fall. So our job as physical therapists is to keep people upright, preferably. And if they go down, we want it to be as controlled as possible, which is kind of where the caregivers come in. How can they control the falling aspect and how can they make it safer? And if somebody falls and it is appropriate for them to get up, how does one get up from the floor? Either by themselves or with help. So since we have a mixed group, we'll kind of troubleshoot some maybe situations that you guys have seen or had happen to you where you might want some advice. Falls are the leading cause of fatal injury and the most common cause of non-fatal trauma related hospital admissions among older adults. And so older adults is 65 plus. Falls result in more than 8 million injuries treated in the ER annually and over 800,000 hospitalizations, along with 32,000 deaths, which is quite a large number. As we move to this like aging independent model that you hear so much about in the media and in healthcare, I find that we do not pay enough attention to how well a person is moving within that aging cycle. It's sort of like the questionnaires. Can you cook for yourself? Can you manage your meds? Can you do all these things? But who's keeping track of what they look like when they're walking around, or how they're getting in and out of their homes or their cars, or should they be driving, like all sorts of different parts of our mobility. In 2015, the total cost of fall injuries was $50 billion. And Medicare and Medicaid pays primarily for all of those types of costs. So falling is expensive, both fiscally and mentally and emotionally. So on page 2 and 3, and like I said, you guys are going to scan this into the internet, so this is available for people. But I always make the joke in these presentations that this is the textbook way to get up from the floor when you fall. But I tell people like stick it on their refrigerator so that when they go in and they're getting something to eat, they sort of have this visual in their mind about what is the appropriate thing to do. Can I even get up, or should I stay down and try to call for help? The next page is just verbal instructions of how to get up from the floor if one was to fall. So, I hate to put Barry on blast here, but
Sorry.
I said I hate to put you in the focal point of this, but as a human being coming to this, do you feel like you're here more for yourself or as a caregiver? Are you worried about falling?
I'm primarily concerned about myself,
Okay,
because I am 87.
and that's an important number, and we want to keep it that
And
way.
the 65 group are kids.
Yes, yes.
Uh,
And unfortunately, the older you get, the more likely it is that it could happen to you.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I'm very active. We have a 2.5-year-old autistic great-grandchild that lives with me,
Okay,
and that takes some
take some care.
chasing around.
Sure,
And also, I have to build all kinds of stuff in the yard to keep
keep busy.
keep him busy.
Oh, keep him busy. And yourself, right?
And myself, but anyway, yeah, I'm here primarily for that, and
Okay.
I'm also writing a book on caregiving,
Wonderful. So,
but this is a different, we won't get into that now.
so it's all part, well, because you're the only one who's sort of here for themselves, I'm assuming nobody else is here for a fear of falling. Just assuming, but we can kind of talk about both, which is how does this impact caregivers? The stress levels of caring for somebody who might be a fall risk is very, very high for caregivers. So what I'll do is I'll show you what I show my patients and instruct them, and if you would like to try, since it's only you, I'll be happy to be your therapist today.
I'm game.
I love it. And then what we'll do is we'll switch gears a little bit and talk about like things that maybe you guys are noticing within your community here in the building and how to troubleshoot some of those things safely. There are laws around like, you know, can you use gait belts and can you use these devices to help people stay upright? And they're not very favorable to the caregiver, which is always stressful. And what I find caregivers doing, whether it's hired or family or otherwise, is that instead of allowing the older adult to sort of navigate things, instead we start doing everything for them, which in turn actually creates a vicious cycle of increased risk of falling when they go to move. So we talk a lot in PT about how staying active and staying moving and creating lots of different types of mobility is actually the #1 way to stop from falling. Again, in America, we love to tell older adults like go to a 1-floor house because then you don't have to do stairs. But in reality, if you lose the ability to do stairs, you are more likely to fall when a stair comes in front of you because stairs is an excellent way to work all different parts of your body. That being said, 50% of the time I'm encouraging people to go to one level because maybe they have just lost the ability to do them safely. And the other 50% of the time I'm like, no, do your stairs. Make sure you get up and down them once a day. Like, make sure you're maintaining that level. So everybody is different. There is no textbook or cookie cutter way to sort of look at this. And I'm sure as you're all sitting here, you're thinking of different people you work with every day, where you're like, oh yeah, I tell that one to sit there and I'll get all that stuff, because the last thing you want to do on public property is have somebody fall and get hurt. It's also very traumatic for people who see somebody fall and get hurt. That increases fear levels. And what we see in the clinic is the fear of falling is so impactful on a person's ability to move safely, because even if it wasn't them that got hurt. So we kind of mitigate all of those things, but they're sort of in different piles. Like, is this a strength problem? Is it a medication problem that people might be getting dizzy? Is it blood pressure? That's sort of in this barrel. Is it proprioceptive? Is it neuro-based, where maybe they don't feel the bottom of their feet, like a lot of diabetics have a lot of neuropathy? Is it impulsivity? Is it that they're moving too quickly? So we kind of try to pluck down when we have that one patient in front of us, why is that particular person falling? And then we work with that. This is a little different. So what I'll do is I'll line up a chair and I'll get on the ground, which is always wild for people to see. And then I'll show you what the textbook says to get up from a floor. As a caregiver, you would find yourself in a position of getting somebody up. So if you'd like to practice that, we can. It's just us, so it's easy to do that in a small group.
a little for you.
It's fine, I shower relatively daily, so you're okay. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pretend that I've fallen and I'm safe to get up. Before I get down, I should backtrack just a little bit. I'm a little off my normal here. When we're looking at a person falling, we're assessing all of the things I sort of just mentioned. Is this an environmental fall? Is there something medically going on? Is it a situation where somebody like sort of sits up too quickly and then they get a little bit woozy because their blood pressure has dropped? And we're kind of talking about all those things with each person individually. Any person who stands up and they sort of get a little dizzy, we call that orthostatic hypotension. And all it is that the blood pressure drops immediately upon standing, and you have to give it a second to normalize. Sometimes medications can make that far worse, and then sometimes it's just the way the body works, and you just have to give it a second. As people age, it becomes more impactful because our vasculature changes, and the speed of which everything is flowing through the body is just slowed down a little bit. So give everybody that moment to kind of move safely before they get going. Impulsivity really does not work with that type of regulation that the body just has to do. On occasion, there are people who are dizzy constantly, and that might be vestibular, where like the crystals in your ears are a little bit off, or it could be medical related as well, and those people have a harder time staying upright. So that all being said, I assume that whomever is on the floor is okay and ready to get up because they're safe. So what I like to do is I always tell people that you're going to find a stiff surface. Like these chairs are wonderful. They're not super light. They have handles. But if you're in your home, a couch is a great place to kind of get yourself to because it's a lot of space and it's not going to move on you and you can't pull it down. So imagine I'm on the floor and I basically tell people to get into a side lying position and then they're going to rest here. So if you're on your back, you want to bend one knee up and then you're going to use your top arm and your top knee, you're going to push yourself over. Same thing if you're caregiving. You want to get them to this side lying position. I really restrain from pulling on people's arms and things for obvious reasons, but you want to get here. This is a great place to take a break if you need it before you move. Then you take your top arm and you put that on the ground to push yourself up. Now, I'm imagining I don't have any injuries, but of course if you had an injured arm, you wouldn't lie on that side. You also wouldn't use that arm to push up. Then you get to your butt. And you sit here for a few minutes, and a lot of people, you know, their legs are uncomfortable because they're on the floor. But I give people grace here for a little while, especially if you're trying to get them up. You want them to reserve energy because the next step is often the hardest. If I don't have anybody to help me, and even if I do, I try to encourage people to get to a surface that's much more reliable than a human being, if it's close enough. What I prevent people, or I try to encourage people not to do, is to roll onto their knees and crawl. Because people don't like crawling in their elder years. Their knees are not built for that anymore. So instead I teach people how to just kind of like scoot their butt. And then you can kind of take a break anywhere you need it. If you push with your hands, you will lose a lot of energy very fast because these muscles are really not big muscles. They're typically not strong enough to really push yourself around. So I give them a little wiggle. And then let's say I've gotten over to my chair. What I want to do is I want to kind of corner myself with the chair, and now I have to get on my knees. If you have knee pain and you really don't like to kneel on it, I try to encourage people, if there's a pillow, to put it on the floor, take your sweatshirt off, put it under. If you do this right, they should only have to kneel for a quick moment, and then you're up into the next step. Most people's knees don't bend as well as mine do, so I tell people just kind of like tuck them under as much as you can, and you are going to roll. You can keep your hands on the floor or you can keep them on the chair, whichever feels best for that person. I'll do a combo, and then I'm going to twist my body. The strong leg is going to be the one that you lift up because that's the leg that's going to be the pusher. So you can push both hands here and get up, and then just kind of get a butt cheek on the chair. And once you have a cheek on the chair, everybody's safe, and like we've made it up to the floor. Most people are really, really tired after doing a transfer like that. And that's doing it as textbook and as easy and as safely as possible. Typically what I find in the community, when people fall, they sort of get stuck on the ground. And a lot of people, a lot of caregivers, want to kind of pull them from this point up, and you actually still want to try to get them on at least a knee, so that way their leg is supporting their center of gravity. Because here, and being pulled up, even being lifted from the back, they have to like create a different placement for their feet, and that's more steps in the process. If an incident happened where you needed somebody to get up, if you could help them still get into what I call like a half kneeling position, and again, you can tuck stuff under in a controlled environment, and then had a hand support, you could have them leave their hands here and you could support them from the back. But that's where I would go so that people can get up like that. Questions?
Ashley, what are the rules, what are the rules about?
For
helping-
here.
For here.
So we're no lift. So if
Yeah.
You're
someone-
call the ambulance if you can't get up by
Yeah.
yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah, because that's the way I remember it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because we do worry about, we are
It's
not,
liability.
yeah, we're not good about diagnosing whether something is broken or hurt, or
Yeah.
whether we're hurting someone more by helping them
Yeah.
up.
So it's a good point. So what I often make the joke when there's a big group, that when a person falls in the community, one of two things happens. Either people, like at grocery store, people love falling in grocery stores. I don't know why, but they do. And parking lots, especially in the wintertime. So what the community does is they either rush that person, and there's like too much help, and there's too much stimulus, and there's too many people directing, too many chefs in the kitchen, so to speak, and that person's still a little traumatized from the act of falling. Or the second thing happens where somebody falls and everybody's just kind of walking by them because they're afraid to help, or they don't know how to help, or they don't want to get involved, whatever the case may be. So through these programs and through these conversations, we sort of troubleshoot those for individuals. If you are all the people who might be afraid of falling, how to get yourself out of those situations safely. That being said, anytime a person falls, the big thing is to give them a few minutes of just trying to figure out how they feel. Make sure that things are working properly. If you're waiting for like help to come, and I'm assuming you just call EMS and the ambulance comes and the fire pit come, you can, as long as they haven't hit their head, you can sort of adjust them into a more comfortable position, and I'm sure as long as it's hands off. If they want to get up on their own and you guys feel safe, I would just set up a chair and kind of verbalize the same instructions as you sort of see here, and that is a good enough way to kind of coach them along. Because most people don't want the ambulance to come. They're very like, I don't want to be in trouble, and I don't want my kids to find out, and like all these things. So it is a lot. And so you have your frequent fallers, which are very risky and very, those might be the people that I restrict a little bit more accessibility to and keep them in chairs or places where sometimes if you have very impulsive people, one strategy in therapy is to sort of corner them into places where they have to move too many things to get out. And then by the time they've moved those things, the caregiver or the attending person or whomever is sort of aware that they're on the move. So tray tables are really convenient for that, especially in the hospital. On the other hand, you have people who are very slow movers, and they increase fear in a very different way because momentum is actually your friend. So if you move quickly, and you move pretty quickly from what I've seen, it's actually your friend. As long as you're not like too fast. Because momentum saves energy, and your body gets into the rhythm that it created when you were a child, which is when you learned how to walk. So there is this perfect velocity that we try to achieve for people, because if you hesitate, you're going to go over with any wrong move. Yeah. Questions? What can I answer? Yeah, it's like a Q&A.
I can tell you.
Tell me everything.
Well, you don't want to know that.
You don't even know.
But I owned a flooring store for a long time. And two of the hazards that we always watched for was one, a narrow step between two floors.
Yep.
And it should be 18 at least inches wide.
Mm-hmm.
And because people would go down, expect
Another one. Yep.
and fall. And the other thing was a short ramp
Yep.
that goes between two heights that would normally be a step or something less.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody tried to make it,
Jimmy Rigo ran
well,
there.
thought it would be less hazardous as a ramp,
Yeah.
but you don't visualize it as being a step up and you trip on it.
Yeah,
And where you're seeing it a lot lately is in ramps, asphalt ramps down in the parking lots that have that
big slopes.
the slopes on the sides and also on curbs.
So curbs are like a talking point we normally talk about is that you do see a lot of trade-off for ramps versus curbs. And what I find for a lot of my patients who really, they either don't have stairs in their house or they haven't done them in a long time, the curb is terrifying, even though it's 4 inches. So I've seen people do it where instead of going up that 4-inch curb, because it's right in front of the door that they're going to, they'll walk another 100 feet down to like the rampy part, and then go up the ramp, and then go back to where they were going.
But
So
that's a very gradual ramp.
it's a very gradual ramp because it was built through the ADA.
I was talking about.
Yeah, so the general community, as they build things, they don't necessarily think about the disabled community being the mobilizers on that. So a ramp, by definition in our world, to be ADA compliant is that it has 1 foot of run for every 1 inch of rise.
Yeah.
And so if you have a 8-inch step, you need 8 feet of ramp in order to get safely a wheelchair or somebody who's mobility impaired actually walking so that they can clear their feet. What you see in the community is people building ramps that are like, they're
Yeah.
really sharp edges. And we see it a lot with people who are doing a really quick model, or maybe loved ones building ramps for loved ones because now they're wheelchair bound or they're mobility impaired and they're just too steep. And another thing that happens as we age that we talk a lot about in practice is that your calves get really tight as you get older and you shuffle a little more and you don't heel toe as well as you once did. And when you're talking about an incline of any sort and your calf and your hamstrings are really tight, your feet actually don't allow you to get as much contact there. And that's another reason why people trip over things, because they're toe dragging or shuffling. It's a scary thing to see. I look at everything when I go out and I just try to put my blinders on as much as I can. But yeah, in here, so what are your responsibilities as employees here when people come here for day program?
Anyone else want to take that?
Because you're not like one-on-ones, right?
Not usually. So first of all, everyone who's here, for the most part, is at some form of dementia. So that adds an extra layer
Absolutely does.
to both fall risks and giving direction
Sure.
for getting up and for moving, remembering walkers, remembering cans that are needed.
Impulsivity.
Exactly.
Yes.
So that being said, I mean, you guys do a little bit of everything. There's a lot of movement.
Okay.
These guys do a lot of games, from mini golf to darts to all sorts of stuff. And they do a lot of exercises, which is what I'm really interested in, how we can direct people so that they are a little bit stronger and have that, are better.
Yeah, so are
As far as
most of
goals.
your, just to kind of dial back a little bit more of your community here, are most people living in home situations where they have family taking care of them and they
Yes.
just need respite care during the day so they can go to work, whatever,
Yep.
all those sorts of things. So not many, if any, are coming from facilities.
No, every once in a while, we have someone who's maybe at a facility or at the beginning of a facility.
Like a rehab stay of some sort?
Exactly.
Okay. So exercise we know is great for everybody. It's especially great for people who are struggling with memory loss or Alzheimer's of any sort because it improves circulation to the brain, which theoretically gives us the best chance that we have for positive reinforcement and memory retention and safety awareness, all the things that the brain is supposed to do. Unfortunately, with varying stages of memory loss and varying receptive awareness of information, it's really hard to kind of create a program for everybody to participate at the same level, which I'm sure you guys experience every single day. So the best advice I would have, and I don't know what your resources are, but is to start with, like, if you can, breaking them up into different groups, which I'm sure you do, but to create as much blood flow in as little amount of time as you can that's safe. So seated exercises, I'm sure, is where you guys all start, but it's not terribly unrealistic to think that somebody like myself could come in and work with your group for one day and say, like, oh, okay, if this is your average group, these are the most bang for your buck. What we know about falling is that a lot of it is just forgetfulness, even in our body, our able bodies, that we just haven't gone up a slope. When you're little, you run up a slope all the time, it's not a big deal. As you get older, you stop moving in a slope. we don't turn as well. We don't turn our head as well when we're moving, and all of those things can be components of why we fall. So exercises for this group is often creative based versus like physical based, and a lot of that comes around the safety. So is this a room where you might exercise?
Yep.
Okay. And what things are you doing now that you kind of find better? Either you're bored with it, or it's just not like really hitting home the way maybe it once did.
I'll leave that to you guys.
I mean, I think the opposite is happening. We're not bored. They're loving the chair workouts.
Okay, so-
They're loving
So
chair
they're
yoga.
okay. They feel good about it, and if you repeat the same things, it doesn't necessarily carry over from one time to
Still
another.
love it,
Okay.
yeah.
Do you guys feel like caregivers, like it could be more?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so that's really what we're trying to like grab here, is that we need more out of it. So you do chair yoga. What other things are we doing?
Chair, qigong,
Okay.
yoga,
We
chair.
have 1 pound dumbbells that they use
Okay.
for like the yoga or like, you make the workout, so.
Yeah, so we do, combination of stretching and weights.
Okay.
And no weights for some people, and so working that individually. We walk every day
Okay. In the
Down.
facility?
in the winter, down as far as we can go in the building
Okay.
and back. When the weather's nice, we go outside.
Okay. And so if you're running like, let's say the walking program for the day, what's the ratio of people, like workers to adult participants?
Yeah.
Like 3 or so.
Okay. And do you feel like with your current population or the average population that that's like a safe ratio? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So, I know I'm so spoiled. I work with people one at a time, so it's like I gear everything so personally. So whenever we're building these types of programs for people, we sort of want to identify like what the objective is. So the objective, of course, is to move better and move more. If the next objective is to try to challenge balance in a better, more profound way, we want to spend more time on breaking apart one piece of the balance system. So let's say it's that you're noticing everybody's struggling to get out of their chair safely, or it takes multiple attempts for them to do it. Then I would incorporate that into their balance program, or into an exercise program where we do sit to stands all together with 2 to 3 people. And I would practice the cueing to be very specific. So instead of just demonstration that they might already be doing this, but that they're also verbalizing the steps in the process. So a piece of the memory thing that I've found in a lot of exercise classes is that we don't do enough verbal in addition to like the exercise. So it could be as simple as like we're all going to count the repetitions at the same time, or we're all going to do this exercise, and then we're going to go around and we're going to all list our favorite animal or something, and try to get different pieces of the cognitive puzzle to work together. Because physical only brings us so far. It's the cognitive piece that we're trying to grab. And as you fatigue physically, if you can get a cognitive component in at the same time, you create more brain activity and more blood flow, and you're using your motor skills in your mouth in a different way. So those things retain better. But it takes some creativity to get everybody. Not everybody with memory loss has the same verbal skills anymore, and so there's another piece of the pie. But those are things I would do. Other strategies I might use to grab onto more carryover is to do this, as boring as it is for the people who are sort of providing the care, is to do the same thing, and like you start with a new program and you do the same sequence of things time and time again, but you add a harder component at the end. So you build in the severity or the complexity of the skills, and then you bring it back down. So you're kind of like climbing a hill. That way you're getting them warmed up, and then they're getting fatigued, but they're not too fatigued to do that hard thing. And maybe that hard thing is a balance thing, like a standing thing instead of being in the chair. And again, that's depending on your population, that can be tricky. I don't think we do enough standing activities with people with balance problems. We sort of succumb everybody to the chair. We succumb everybody to the houses upstairs, and we're like, okay, well, we don't want you to fall, so we're just going to take all these hazards away. But the reality is that those hazards are everyday things, and the more we don't do them, the more likely we are falling or impaired when we go to do them. So it's sort of it's a catch-22 as we're working with a lot of older adults, especially with memory issues, that for their safety, we're removing the hazard. Start to like, if you're thinking about program development, thinking about what is my realistic, where do these people live? Do they live in places with stairs? Well, if they live in places with stairs, then there's no reason why, with a ratio of 2 to 1, and you can identify who's really safe and who's not really safe, like doing, foot taps from a standing position if they all have walkers, or they all have canes or some, chairs to hold on the back to. Just to replicate that stair mechanic. You don't necessarily have to step up onto the stair just to get that high hip flexion in a standing position. But as much as I love chair classes and I think that they're great, I do think that we sort of like start to restrain people. And rightfully so, if you don't have a lot of training or a lot of liberties to help them up if they were to fall. So, the last thing you need is, we did a standing exercise and so fell, and then so-and-so's caregiver called and said, why did you do that exercise? Are you crazy?
Yeah.
But the reality is, if you want to make progress, we have to make progress, and the progress is getting out of the chair.
Yeah, so, go ahead.
Well, I was just sort of thinking, today we did the chair workout, and then we did standing behind your chair. And so what you talked about earlier was an added complication, the whole impulsivity.
Yeah.
Because I was showing them how to hold onto their chair and do the exercise, but then one of the people decided she was going to use
Because she's on
my
the move.
chair.
Yeah.
Right, and then it was like,
You didn't say her chair.
right. Yeah, and then switching, okay, now we're gonna work on the left leg, well, they have to revise, and was I adding complication to
So
the exercise by,
by switching.
yeah,
Right. So there's a layer, right? Is that it's fine if you were one person, one instructor, 2 or 3 people with an additional support staff. It's a different if you have 10 or 15 or 19 people in one room at the same time. Your attention then goes to that person who requires the most amount of help. And that's the same as classrooms, and it's the same as all these situations when we're dealing with bigger groups. So one thing you could try is to separate the group that needs more help from another group and change times. I don't know what staffing looks like, but that is a possibility where you kind of take the people who who can follow 1 or 2 step commands or switching, and they can still mirror image their movements better, and then separate them from the people who maybe who require more support, and then bring complexity to the group that can manage it. And again, I don't know what your schedule looks like. I'm trying not to be unrealistic about what your options are, but in the effort of trying to make progress and to switch things up and to be more impactful, that's kind of where you have to go, which is hard. Not everybody looks like you at 87. And it's important. The cognitive piece is really important because it depends on which part of the cognitive piece is missing. And it's hard to address all of those people exactly the same because their needs are very different.
What were you gonna say? Oh, just that you're talking about standing exercises and activities, and so they do bowling and they do cornhole and things that require them to stand up and do
Sure.
like
Multitasking.
Yeah, multitasking. Are you feeling like that's helpful?
It's
for
super
as a
helpful.
prevention?
So you could if let's say cornhole's going great and everybody's been doing it and they love it, you could add a complexity to it that they have to, I don't know, I'm trying to think, I don't think it's very good. But you could call out the color that they're throwing the ball to, or the color of the ball, and the
Or
person
3 different baskets.
Exactly,
like that.
something
Okay.
like that, so that they have to do some processing on top of the skill that they just learned or that they've perfected. And if you do that, you'll start to see different pieces of the puzzle starting to link back together. And that's really exciting to kind of get it to the next level. And the other level about exercise is to think about its translation to functionality. So, a lot of times when I go to standing things, we do a lot of hip abduction or straight plane stuff, but that's not necessarily where people are falling. They're falling on the stairs. So putting a step in front of them, probably not for the people who might then try to step up on that step, versus understanding a tapping is very different. But you could use a cone, so that way they don't think they're going to step up on it, and that mimics the step up very similarly. And that's something that we do in the clinic all the time, and we progress towards something. But the act of just standing on one leg and tapping something slowly is very different than what we see happen in all of our adult exercise classes across America, which is just like, the quicker the better, and that's not necessarily the purpose.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like redefining what your objectives are and where you can carry them. But yeah, adding a cognitive component. And maybe, something I make people do is like, I want you to list 5 animals. So we throw a ball back and forth and I task them, and maybe they need cueing that says like, okay, I need another animal, and they say another animal. Or, you ask them, you do a ball throw and you ask everybody where they were born, or like the parts of their memory that are really intact. And unfortunately, sometimes people start talking a lot, and that can be it. You gotta play with it though.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, do you guys do a lot of singing? I mean, it's kind of a silly question, but singing, I'm sure, is very popular. Huh?
Yeah.
Just about every day.
All day, every day. Yeah.
It's Disney here. We break into song every 5 minutes.
Unreal.
And music is huge because music, it stays in your brain differently than verbal skills do, and short-term memory doesn't develop, but music stays there. And so it's really remarkable that people can remember songs from their childhood, but not necessarily the children that they bore into the world. But it is a different component of cognitive, because that's a memory-based thing versus an impulse, like responding to a question. So still great, but it serves a different purpose. What other questions can I help
I have
with?
a very specific question.
Great, I have very specific answers.
Sometimes when we play games, we have a member who like when we play cornhole, she'll like get like super low and it looks as if she's like about to fall over. How can we like help her with that?
Has she fallen yet?
Not
Yeah,
yet.
it's just
but it's
scary.
always like in like the back of our minds,
Of
because like when
course.
sometimes when she throws it, she'll like take a step and like lose her balance.
So what I would do is I would set a table near that person and just cue them to put a hand on the table. And then that way they have a hand on contact, so even if they step, they still have an upper body on contact. It's remarkable because I ask people how they squat every day of my life. And what people do when they squat, especially as they age and they've forgotten how to squat normally, is that they squat like this, which is a really unsafe place to squat. Now, if you're a baseball catcher and you're in the pros, you squat really deep and your knees are in front of your toes. But if you're in the regular world, we like our butts and our knees to be behind our toes. So somebody like that, I would definitely put something in her, I'd block her arm.
Yeah.
She won't fall if you block her arm. But if you have people who they go to stand and they might really go far forward, is in my exercise class, I might have people do sit to stands and then have them reach their butt back far enough so that it's like, I always cue them, sit like you're sitting in a chair that's too far behind you. And everybody switches their mechanics, and I cue them to be upright. I might use a ball or a variety of different things. But this type of position is terribly unsafe. And I would correct it every time if I saw it, because I'm me. So, but in your particular situation, I would just block her. But everybody else, I might put that into my exercise class where we start practicing just really good squats and sit to stands. There are tests that we use in the clinic that indicate fall risk based on their how many sit to stands they can do in 30 seconds, or how long it takes to do 5 of those. So for all the people that you see, they try to start getting up from this position, well, they're never going to get out of that chair. Then you have the other, you say, okay, scoot to the edge of the chair, and they might go way over here, or they're holding onto their walker, and then they're getting up like this, and that's just as unsafe as anything else that we do. So that's the real function of sit to stands and squatting, is to get rid of that and put the weight on your butt. But that they feel like they're going to fall over, and so that's why they lean forward, which then they fall forward.
Yeah.
Or they get stuck. A lot of people get stuck sort of halfway in between there and up, and that's scary
sometimes
too.
It takes them a couple times to like
Oh
get
yeah,
their momentum
call those
up.
false starts.
Yeah.
People false start. Any other specifics? I love specifics. It's easier to address specifics in a small group.
I mean, I'll share, it's kind of like a happy story, that one of our members who is limited mobility has the most powerful core. And so it's hard for her to get around, but when she goes to stand up,
She's ready.
she's like,
She's learned it. She's perfected it.
she was intentional about
Correct.
building the core, and it's paying off dividends today.
It is one of those things where like intention of exercise is such an important piece. And I think that become a society that's like, as long as you're moving, it's great, which is true. But if we put intention behind the movement and understand why it's important, it translates much better into the everyday life that we live. And it also, especially in your world, it translates to a much easier day at work and a much easier and safer day. Because you don't have to worry about her in that moment, right? Maybe you worry about her in different moments, but that moment, you know, she's great, and you can attend to something else. Yeah, any other specifics?
I get a lot of questions actually, because we kind of have a resource center and people call, even if they do not come here specifically. But we have, you know, a 3-to-1 ratio here, and we have open spaces, and we have chairs that we know are safe and you know, built for this. But I get a lot of questions, especially from older adults who are caregiving for a partner, and you know, it's one-on-one. They have mobility issues, and they are not particularly stable and in great shape. And I get a lot of questions about, you know, my husband, my wife, my mom, whoever is a fall risk potentially. How do I help them at home, make it safer, make them safer? What can I do with them to make sure that they aren't falling?
Okay, so not necessarily just environmental measures,
Yeah,
but like, so honestly, the best answer for that is to send them to PT, to somebody who works specifically with balance impaired individuals. And sometimes, especially in a memory loss situation, it might be just to help the caregiver get those tools, because what cues that person may respond to on day 1, maybe day 5, they are not feeling so hot, and those cues no longer are resonating, but that person needs to still get them to facilitate the same motion. So that would be my first, like, not that you're a doctor or anything, but you know, you say like physical therapy has these resources for you. And then we can help make goals for that person and to assess which pet, like why is their mobility fractured? Is it really memory loss, or is it actually physically based? Is it neurologically based? In terms of how you can help them, certain things, which I'm sure you guys are probably have resources for, is like, how do you make your home safe? So, you know, wide spaces, no throw rugs, getting rid of cords, making sure areas are well lit. And part of the well lit, I like to remind people, is not necessarily that you have dark rooms and then lighted rooms, but that you have the same amount of light throughout the whole space. Because a lot of people have vision impairments, maybe they're wearing bifocals or progressives or trifocals even in some cases, and our depth perception is very different through different parts of our lenses. And so having one even lit area is a nice way to make sure that people don't have to battle the dark and the light. Other things that they can do is sort of make sure that they have the right assisted device. So do you guys have like a loan closet here in Bath where people can get walkers and canes and all that stuff?
We usually, I think People Plus
and
has
Respite,
access
yeah,
to
for
direct
sure.
people.
So I sort of talk about that with them, like, do you feel like that cane is enough for that person? Do we feel like we need to go to a walker? And those are very regular questions. The other questions I sort of dive down is like, which part are you worried about? Is it everything? Is it nothing? You know, is it car transfers? Is it, you know? And you have to break it, you sort of have to start breaking it down really heavily to really be able to answer it, because everyone is different. You know, somebody might be calling, they might not mention that that person already has like neuropathy in their feet. So really they're not just falling because they're not strong, they're falling because they can't feel their feet, which is a very different problem to be had.
Yeah. Very often it's getting out of chairs that I get questions
Yeah,
about.
so that's the
An
thing.
older adult trying to get someone out.
So
in and out of cars is
yeah,
especially
so
scary.
any type, yeah, so people like to fall out of cars, right? They sort of like slip their butt and then they get their feet on the ground, and at this point you really can't do anything. You're really not in good shape. So the height of the car is a big part of car transfers. But I would say if you wanted to just like dive into this part of it, and I don't know if I'm repeating stuff that you already know, I apologize. I always tell people you're going to scoot to the edge of the chair. You want your butt as far out as you can. Both feet need to be under you and on the ground, preferably. You never know. The one facade people love to do, especially memory impaired adults, is that they love to pull on their walkers, which is super naughty and super unsafe. And I always tell them, like, your hands belong here. In the event that you're in a chair that does not have handles, you would use either the bottom of the chair, or some people can push from their legs depending on their core strength, but something that's not going to move. And that's where I go. The other thing therapists say to people is nose over toes. So we want the head to be here before we start standing. But we don't want it to travel here because I'm not actually standing up in this motion. I'm still the same angle I was a second ago. So we lean forward, and then from here we push, and we're gonna lift our chest. So lifting your chest is the other cue to get them into an erect posture. And once you kind of get up, I cue people to squeeze their butts together, because if you squeeze your butt, you get from here to here, and it's really nice. And I'm a big fan of that. That being said, about midway, when you're here, is when you can let go and grab your device. It takes a lot of practice. You might have a whole class maybe one day if you see this enough where you're like, we're all going to practice this 10 times. And you're going to use the same words in simple phrases over and over and over again, just to get some muscle memory with that. It is really difficult, though, to answer those questions over the phone.
Yeah, I like the idea of setting them somewhere. Some of the things that we tend to run into, especially with people that have memory loss, is that caregivers have a hard time bringing them to something like physical
Absolutely.
therapy, or
It's a huge barrier.
so they are very often sort of trapped at home trying to figure all of this out.
So
and like how to,
home health is a really great resource for people like in those situations. Again, timing, if you're somebody who works, home health might not work past 5 o'clock at night. And even, to be honest, having a memory impaired adult coming to my office at 6 o'clock at night is really not the best time for them either. So it's really not functional. It's not a great use of our resources. But home health would be something that I'd have them talk to their doctor about, and at least to go for a couple of times, give them the resources for where in their home they're the most affected, and kind of go from there. I've seen another thing happen where older adults move in with their grown children, and the grown children want to keep them safe and they want to dote on them. And so you take this really normal, independent adult, and they're downsizing, or maybe they need a little help with driving, or whatever the case may be, and then the adult child takes all the responsibilities away from them. And the cognitive decline and the depression that sets in when you have your grown child telling you you can't do anything, it's a huge mental piece that I try to be like cautious and aware of when I'm talking to people about these transitions, or when I'm actually telling them that they're no longer safe to do that task. So something in your area is talking about like compromising. So if you were safely unloading your dishwasher in your own home and now you're living with your daughter, maybe that's a really safe thing that you can continue to do, so you can feel purposeful and you can get out of your chair, which is the most important thing to do, and so that you can still feel like you're doing something. And the dishwasher is actually remarkably easy to kind of do in sequences, which I often remind people. And a lot of times I'm like, yeah, you can do the whole dishwasher, and then maybe getting down to that lower part is just too low for people. So then I say, okay, well, we're going to take away the bottom part. We're just going to do the top shelf. And then I have them relocate all their cupboards so that maybe the top shelf and all the cups go right above that space, so that that dishwasher is still that person's job and they're still getting up and tasking. And so those types of strategies to like find the things that work are still great for the person and the caregiver. They're still going to be worried, and I just have to let them you got to be worried for a few minutes. You're going to be worried whether or not they're doing something, so you might as well let people feel good. Any other questions? Pretty close.
Well,
yeah, pretty close.
I live in an old house.
Okay. Steep stairs. Yeah.
And I have banisters on both sides,
Okay.
which are
Great.
good, because I find I'm right-handed very much, and I need,
Some support to get
well,
up.
I don't need the support for balance, I need it for strength,
Yeah.
to give myself
A
yank
good shove up.
And the same thing coming down, I'm right-handed, but unfortunately the railing's on the other side. So I need the railings on both sides.
Yeah. So when I do this my normal, come see me at People's Plus, so you can get like the authentic patient experience. I'll be there in 3 weeks, but what I make the joke in my classes, especially for people who are responsible for exercising, is that like these muscles are really big. Nice, big, beautiful, chunky muscles that God gave us. And they were designed to do a lot more work. But what we see in older adults, especially as they're afraid to fall, or as arthritis has set in, or whatever the case may be, there's lots of reasons for it, we become heavily reliant on our arms to do the jobs of our legs. if you were telling me that you were, and you're not the only one, everybody says these things to me, and you see it, they're really pushing, right? And then they lock out their knees, they do one of these like crazy things that's wild to me. Part of it's fear-based, part of it's pain-based, part of it is just like muscle memory-based. So what I try to do is basically reset your entire physicality so that you learn to trust these really big, perfectly normal muscles to do the jobs of these puny ones. But always hold on, because you're holding on for balance. So it gives you that like third point of contact. Because in the event that something did happen and I took your arm away and it was broken or was in a sling or whatever, a very active, able-bodied person is suddenly unable to move because you have your brain and your fear and your balance system has relied on this as being a very high contributing factor. In reality, it's not supposed to be. So banisters were built for help, not for like pulling yourself up. And so what I then do when I'm talking to people, especially for the first time, is to figure out what about their legs do they not trust on those stairs. Now, steep old steps, they're just really high, and it just might be that they're just too high to safely do without using their arms. But I would still integrate that to their exercise program, and we would work on the barriers like that present us. There's something called sarcopenia, which is muscle wasting as you age. So the body naturally loses muscle mass as we age, and that's called sarcopenia. However, semicolon, comma, whatever you want to say, muscles are designed to respond to demand. So even though as we age we have this sarcopenia process happening, if you demand muscles to work, they will come to the party. They just don't have as much to come to. So we just sort of have to, change it up and like add complexity to that so that we're getting over these thresholds and challenging them in new ways.
Yeah, I went to a physical therapist wherever it was. It's not across the street, but it's in Brunswick.
Mm-hmm.
And she gave me a morning set of exercises, a bunch of sit-ups and a bunch of lunges, which
Lunges are hard.
I don't like lunges.
No one likes lunges, and they're good for us, but there are better things that, like, if your knees hurt or if you don't have great mobility, we can trick you in another way.
Well, I don't have any problem with that. I just don't.
You just hate them, and you're allowed. But those are good. Those are
But
good.
I mean, I have this routine, and what I do is, boy, all but I get up. I have some cereal. Then I do the sit-ups. Then I go unload the dishwasher or something,
Sure.
and come back and do the lunges because.
You hate them so much.
Well, I mean, I'm winded after I do
So-
25 sit-ups.
Well, and so I like hearing that because I want people to be winded. So what I would say to you is, you're in great shape. Obviously, you're doing all these things. So what about the stairs? Do you need your arms to do the power ball, the leg, like your legs are there? And then we have to say, is it really that big of a deal? Now, to me, it's a big deal. To you, it might not be. So we
You
sort of,
mean you're going up the stairs?
yeah, pulling yourself
Well,
up.
I mean, I'm not pulling myself up like that. I mean,
You use your arms.
I do use it to
Yeah.
to pull some.
Mm-hmm. When I think those old
But I mean,
steep
there
steps,
are. I mean, they're.
they can be as high as 10 inches in some of those old houses.
Well, it's not. They're not that bad.
Some of them, the average step is 7.5 to 8 inches in like our regular
Yeah.
roads. But back then, they had a really small amount of
Well,
space and
They're
they're narrow.
narrow.
Yeah. A lot of people have to go down sideways a little bit on those old ones because there's not enough plate to get your foot. And as much as we hate sideways, we live in an area where we have a lot of old homes, so we kind of have to succumb to what we do to stay safe.
And triangular stairs.
Oh yes, where you have really skinny
Two
parts.
triangles.
Yeah. You have great stairs. See, it keeps you young. Any other questions? Your kids are doing so great. My kids have been doing cartwheels down the hall by now.
Thank you.
You guys are doing great. What schools do you guys go to?
Elderston, Dresden Elementaries,
I'm sorry.
and I am pre-K.
You're in pre-K? How old are you, 4? My daughter is 4 years old. Yeah, she's going to be in pre-K next year because she's a November baby, but there you go to Brunswick. I was going to say my husband works at Dyke Knoll right down the street, so I was wondering. Any other questions? I'm available by email or in the clinic. I work in Brunswick. But I do lots of different types of things. So if after listening to me babble on forever, if there's something that you feel like I could help more specifically, feel free to reach out.
This was incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
Thank
Good.
you.
I'm sorry it's not exactly what whomever, this isn't exactly what I
No expectation.
It's interesting because with small groups, it's a lot easier just to find specifics and work
Yeah.
through them. And then like with a group of people who are really struggling with balance and falls, it just is geared differently towards them. But yeah, it is an ever-evolving conversation that we have to keep having just to make sure that we're not missing pieces of it. But,
Yeah.
all right.
Well, for us, we're such a big part of some people's days and weeks.
You are their
We have
week,
people
right?
that are
Like-
here all day, every day, and it's nice to know how to sort of help them so that they can continue to age
Yeah.
in place as long as possible.
Right, and
safely.
it's important for the caregivers to have respite, right? We talk about that all the time in my clinic, is that, you know, the caregiving job is very, very hard. It's hard to be the patient. It is really hard to take care of that person, and we do not attend to their needs, I think, enough in a lot of situations. So I've been here for 10 years. I did not know you guys were here, so this is great. This is something as well, and people are constantly looking for that respite.
Yeah.
Is there a cost? Well, I'm sure there's a cost. That's a silly question.
So we never turn anyone away due to an inability to pay.
Okay.
So we are, what are we right now? $70 for a 4-hour session. So we have a morning session and an afternoon. So it's $70 for a 4-hour session, or $140 for the day.
Okay.
But we also work with long-term care insurance and Section 61, 68, 63, all of those. All state programs that'll help to cover
Long-term
respite
care insurance I
costs.
had.
Yes.
You lost me at the number. But that's good to know.
Yeah. So we have access to grants and scholarships and things like that. So we find a way to get respite to those who need it.
Okay. And this is primarily memory impairment. and
Yes.
Alzheimer's. Got it.
Yeah. Or we often also have people with major vision problems, or again fall hazards that it just makes them unsafe to be at home
By
while their
themselves.
caregiver is doing errands or something like
A
that.
lot of Alzheimer's.
A lot of
Yeah.
Alzheimer's. Yeah.
And my
Different
wife, I got involved because this is at a flooring store. And my wife got Alzheimer's and cancer at the same time.
It's a hard day.
And I was going to run a store, which I own.
And you
right?
still have to run it,
And
right?
I still had to run it in Waterville. And
Layer upon layer, right? That's how it works.
so we looked all over for some kind of a solution, because she was very bright and had been an art teacher all her career, and couldn't find any adult day services, daycare, whatever you want to call it, for her that she was at all happy about. But we had a summer house down here, an old family house, and we found this, which was in Brunswick, and it was perfect. She loved it. And
It's nice.
so then I volunteered to be on the board, only to find out that the board was filled with people whose spouses had been exactly the same situation,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And
Everyone's a caregiver.
many of them anyway. And so it's a very devoted
Sure.
group. And there are not many groups like it around.
Well, in 10 years that I've been here, I've not met one yet. And we see a lot of memory, not a lot, because outpatient PT is a really hard place for them to thrive in.
Yeah.
There's a lot of barriers, time being one of them, carryover being one of them. And the caregivers are typically working, or they're mobility impaired themselves, and maybe access is hard. So home health has tried to step up their game a little bit more, but there are honestly not enough home health providers to be able to go to the homes. And so it's really like very infrequent. And if the patients aren't making enough progress, or they're not meeting goals, and they don't necessarily qualify for home health either. So you really are very stuck. And I think the only people who know what it's like to be a caregiver are other caregivers, and they're the ones that know how important it is to keep places like this open. And luckily you have some young people to help manage it, which is great. Everybody's important. Everybody's important. We need
You
everybody.
kids.
Yeah. There you go.
You young kids.
Well, Christina, thank you so
You're
much.
so welcome.
This was
Thank you
wonderful.
for tolerating
Very helpful.
That was awesome.